All right, so we're going to do the next walkthrough. This walkthrough, we're just going to do the index because doing all these pieces, it's pretty exhaustive. So we're going to work on doing the header for CSS grid. We're also going to be looking at adding comments to help organize our CSS code and to start to actually modify using root variables, because we can also start introducing that so we'll be ready for future designs. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead and kind of jump into where we are. So we have our colors. We want to go ahead and add those in for what we are going to do for when we design our colors, but we also want to look at our layout. So our header, our navigation for all of our pages, this was something that we wanted to have, that we had as our general idea, that we'd have some image with a title, and then we would have these items, okay? Now, when I'm looking at this, this is my header, and I have a title, and then I have a nav. So I actually got to think in terms of grids and grids inside of grids, okay? And then let's kind of look down to our other sizes. So we'll go to tablet size. Still basically the same. We're just shrinking the spacing. So if we looked at our navigation for our page 1, we have spacing in between the links and our last link, which would be our merch page. And then we took that spacing away when we got to our tablet. Okay, and then when we went to cell phone, let's look at what that is. We have a vertical navigation. So we have our title, our logo is actually switching, and then we have a vertical navigation. So we want to set up those pieces. Okay, so let's go to our walkthrough, and we're going to go ahead and open our stuff. Again, if it doesn't have your project folder, go ahead and open it. So I'm in this one. Okay, so this is leaving off of where the last walkthrough was. Now we're looking at adding more styling. Okay, so the first thing that we have is where we have code that's starting to affect a lot of things. Now, this from here to here is kind of like our code that's affecting everything. So our images, this is like affecting every image. And then here we have our main grid. So I'm going to go ahead and write main grid of page. And then I can control / and comment that out. And then I'm going to scroll down to the very bottom of it and put end of main grid of page. Control / to comment that out. This makes it easier. So if I was, hitting like Control F to find, I could say main grid, and I could start searching for where that is, which would make it easier for me to find stuff on my CSS page because stuff is going to start getting congested. So I'm also going to, this is kind of default formatting. So I'm going to go ahead and write default formatting. That's default formatting for my page. And then I'm going to write, before and afterwards, I'm going to write, an end of that, end of default formatting. So if I organize my page in terms of what I'm looking at, that will make it easier. It'll also make it easier if instead of doing like when I'm doing like overarching things, I'm going to start having a bunch of grids with a bunch of pieces. So actually using classes and naming them intelligently will make it easier for us to find stuff. Okay, and then after this, we can have all of our media queries. And then we can scroll all the way to the end. And this is the end of media queries. Okay, and this just makes it easier for us to organize code. If we don't need to use that stuff, we can minimize it for the time being. Okay, all right, so we can have grids within grids, and now what we're looking at is we're looking at the header, this right here. We want to organize this to start to do this layout, okay? So what we got to do is we got to make sure that we are thinking of the actual grid. So of the header, the direct children that we could have, okay, of the header, because the header would become my parent element. So if I put grid on the header, then the H1, the nav will become my items. All right, so I actually don't end up having a logo on there. So I am going to need to have a place for the logo. So let's go ahead and write that in, because we're going to end up using that. Okay, so I am going to, at least for the time being, we'll just put a paragraph. It will end up probably being an I element, and I'll just type icon. Okay, and then we can use that to actually organize our stuff. So let's make sure that we're saving everything. Okay, so in terms of what we have 3 elements that would be part of our header would be our main grid, and then these would be the direct children, which would become those grid items. Okay, so we want to set that up. So again, remember we're going to have to define our columns and our rows, and then set it up as grid. But now in this case, the header is going to have its own grid, okay? So this would be my header grid. So in terms of cascading style sheets, as long as I'm not overriding any of this stuff, then it's going to be okay. So I'm going to use it here, but then I'm going to skip down to here for designing my actual header grid. So I'm going to, say header grid elements. And everything that's in there is going to be inside of this. Okay, so I'm going to type inside there. But our main header, this is right here, this is going to become our parent element, okay? So we can say display grid. And let's think of what we want to do. Now, we are actually going to end up having multiple elements on top of each other. This image is going to be behind all of this stuff and the title. So I'm actually going to have some overlapping things. So the nav, my icon, that title, and that image. So we don't actually have that image in there yet, do we? Let's make sure we have that image. So where did I put this? Okay, we'll have to look for it. Coffee house. That's what we're looking for. Even that one would be okay. That's why it's beneficial to actually store all your images. That was my mistake. Okay, I like that one better. This one. Okay, so we're going to download this. I need to make sure that I'm saving this in the proper folder. Okay, and then this will be my header image. Okay, as long as it's saved as a JPEG, that should be my image. So that's what's going to go in the background. Then I have this title, I have my logo, I have my links. Okay, so there's my title, there's my icon, there's my navigation. I need my image. Okay, so image tab, let's find it. That was the header image right here. I'm just going to copy the project path, come here and paste. And now I got a good name. Okay, so this is now a direct child. So I got 4 direct children. Okay, I got an H1, the image, paragraph, and the nav. Now, for this, it makes things easier if I specify all of my stuff individually. So sometimes we'll want cascading style sheets to happen where it's cascading all of our styling. Other times we actually want it individually. I'm actually going to put a class on all of these. So I'm going to say class, and I'm going to say header title image class, oops, and I need to make sure that I put it inside quotes, class, and I'm going to do this as header, actually this will be hero image. Okay, remember we can't use spaces though. For my icon, I'm going to put a class, and I'm going to put header icon, nav, I'm going to put a class, header, nav. Okay. Make sure that you have quotes for each thing. This will make it so it's really, really easy for me to identify. I am looking for stuff that's in my header. I could even do it like this so it would be technically make more sense. Header, hero, image. So I can find all of my stuff using my class. This makes a lot of sense. Okay. So let's go ahead and start targeting those things. So in our header, we want grid template columns. What do we want? Now let's think in terms of looking at this. I am going to put this in the middle. So that means that I need to have some empty rows here. I need to have some empty rows here. And it actually looks like this is twice as big as this. Okay. And then my space. So if I'm looking and I'm counting, I got like 1 row, 2 row, 3 row, 4 row, 5 row. And then for columns, I have, now I'm thinking of these separately, 1 column, 2 column, 3 column. And I'm using that just so I can position this in the middle. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows and 3 columns. Okay. So in terms of space, let's do 1FR. We can adjust later. It's usually best always to start with FR units. Grid template rows. And we said 5. So I'm going to do 1FR, 1FR, 1FR. And it's actually, since I'm doing 5 of them, would make more sense just to do this. Repeat 5, 1FR. Okay, so this gives me that space. Now, a lot of times when we start putting grids within grids, if you want everything to size properly, you need to make sure that your header is taking up 100% of that grid space that you gave it. Okay, so we will keep that in mind because we're going to end up having to make those changes. Okay, so now that I have this, so this is end of grid design for header. Okay, so now that we got that, now let's start snapping our stuff. So here, our very first thing, and I'm going to use line numbers to map the stuff. So I actually want like my image. If we're using stuff for grid and we want things to stack on top of each other, then the order of how they appear doesn't matter as much because we can use z-index to adjust things. But I wanted that image to go behind everything. Okay, so this is header, hero, image. That's what I need to call. So I'm going to come here, dot header, hero, image, and then what is my rule? This would be grid, column, and I want it to start where? I want it to start at, well, we did 3 columns. So that means there's a 1, 2, 3, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's 4 lines. So I want it to start at 1 and go all the way to the end. And then for the row, I want it to start at 1 and go all the way to the end. Okay. So let's go ahead and save. Now we can start to open stuff to see what we need to fix. Okay, so there's my image now. It's starting to take this space. And it looks like I'm actually off by 1. So let's go ahead and fix that. Grid, column, save, go back, refresh. Nope. And that's actually an image thing. w3schools.com. Fill image. It's object fit. Okay, and so this can be used for you to make sure that you're taking up the space that you have. So we can choose to have it completely fill or contain the image, and then it may end up giving some bars on the top. We can use it to cover. Okay, so we can play around with these. Okay, not super necessary to initially get this set up. Okay, all right, so now let's go ahead and start doing our other pieces. I'm pretty sure that that's supposed to be there. Okay, let's go to our next one, our header title. So this is our header title. Gotta make sure that we're closing it. If you don't end up, if you write one, like a rule inside of another rule, it's going to cause you some issues. Okay, so grid, column. We want this in the middle. So when I'm looking at the picture, let's look back at our style. Okay, so this is 1, 2, 3, 4. I want this to be at 2, start at 2 and end at 3, or start at 2 and span 1. So 2/3, grid, row, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so this is 1. This is starting at 2 and going to 3. 2/3. Okay, so our Pirate Coffee, now that disappeared, which means that if I'm looking here, the image is actually coming after this. That means that this did do it, but it did it behind the image. So we actually need to change, this is what's called the z-index. So we can start playing with the z-index and giving it a larger number. So we assume that, say, everything starts at 0. If I give it a higher number than 0, then this is going to be in front of the other stuff. So z is the third dimension that we're looking at. So now when I refresh, I see the Pirate Coffee now in front of my image. Okay. The other thing that we are seeing for our images and our text is that there could be some default margins and padding. So if we have not done that for every element, then we're going to want to do that. So this is default formatting. I'm going to target everything, and I'm going to say margin 0, padding 0. And I want to take off any type of default formatting that they have. Problem, it's going to make stuff start snapping to the very edges, which means that we need to design with that in mind. Okay. All right, so now we got that text, our header hero image. We need now to do our icon and our nav class. Okay, so if we're looking at our picture, column-wise, we're going to start at 1 and we're going to go through the whole thing. But our logo is going to start at 1 and go to we might have to change this a little bit. Okay, so we have 3 columns, 1, 2, 3. If we give all of that space, that means that that logo is taking up a lot of that space. So maybe we're going to switch this to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6, so that means that we're just upping it for columns. Okay. So we'll do repeat 6, 1 FR. Now I just broke some stuff because if I come back to my image, now we move some stuff over. So we actually got to move back our headers. So this would go to 7. And now our header title is going to be 1, 2, 3, 2, 4, 5. Should be right now. Okay, so there it is now. And we still got our other stuff. So now we can start positioning the icon. We want it down towards the bottom, and then we want our navigation. And ultimately that's going to go long ways, but that's going to be a grid inside of a grid because these items are not direct children. Okay, so let's go to the icon now. So, this header icon. Make sure that I make it as my class. Okay, and I'm going to do a grid column, and we are starting at 1, going to 2 on the lines. Grid row, we are at the very bottom, so this is 5 to 6. And our Z index is going to be in front of the image. It would automatically do it, but I'm going to go ahead and just say it anyways. Okay, so there's my icon. That is a lot higher than what I see. Yeah, no, that was right. 5/6. Okay, so there's my icon. Now we could do the nav. So this is header nav. And that's going to go right next to here. Dot. And we're going to be basically doing this. But we're starting at 2, 2, and going all the way to the end. 7. There we go. So there's our stuff. Now, this is giving more room because the navigation is actually bigger. This will snap down when we want it. Now, I want to play around with that image because that image is messing with me. It's object fit, and we want to cover. Why are you not going over? This would be a lot easier if I could open the developing tools, but since you guys don't have access to it, I'm not going to do it. width 100%. And then my header, this is what I was talking about us having to specify. There we go. Okay. All right. So if there's any type of spacing or anything, we're going to have to specify the sizing. So we specify the sizing for all of the elements here. Now for the header, I'm saying, yep, I am taking 100% of that space for anything in my header. And then for that image, I'm taking 100% of the space that was given. So when I'm choosing its start and end points, that all makes sense. Okay, so now that we got this, now we are actually going to look at stylizing the header, the nav element. So this part right here, this needs to be set up correctly. Okay, so when we look here now, this nav is going to become, that is a direct child to the header. But when I'm looking, the next container that I'm doing for nav, it's not going to be this because these items are not direct children to the nav. They are direct children, the line items, to the unordered list. So I'm going to put a class here. This is going to be SR only code. We will do that one a little later. Okay, so I'm going to put a class and I'm going to call it so let's call it Nav Container. And actually, I think I'm going to list it with header. The reason why I'm putting header on here is because it's a lot easier for me to see what I'm talking about on styles without having to go back and check what the name was. Okay, so we're going to do header nav container here. And this we have as the logo. Oh, I forgot that I did it that way. Okay, that could probably get moved. Yep, that makes sense. That was dumb on my part. Okay. So we got the header nav container. Let me change some stuff because I removed that. Okay. All right. So that's the end of the header grid. This is now 1, and this is now, that's still the same. That logo is already right there. That was my mistake. All right, so now we're going to do another one. So we're going to do the nav grid, okay, and end of nav grid. Okay, so here, this is where we need to get the header nav container to start styling everything that. So this will become a display of grid, and it will have, let's look at it. So when we're looking at our picture, this is one row, and it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns, but this link 4 ends up having a lot more space. Okay, I could do it differently. I could end up having separate columns in here that are empty for doing the additional spaces. That's one way to do it. Or I can play with the margins and just snap this over to the edge. That is also a way to do this, because I could just give it maybe a class of last link or something to that effect. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to do 1 row, 5 columns. Okay, grid, template, columns, and what do we want? We want 4 rows or 4 columns that are all 1FR, and then we want one that's going to take up more space. We'll call it 3FR. And then we want just 1 grid template rows, and this is going to be Now we could give it a hard size. Let's just say that we're doing 1FR, so it's taking up that full space and I don't have to think about it. Okay. So now if I come here and I refresh, already my element should be spanning across, which is good. That's what I want now. So now let's go to unordered lists. Okay. So already I can see that I need to do some colors and stuff, but the first thing is I need to make it not look like a list so that it can be more like buttons. So here, anything in that nav container, that is an unordered list. So I can actually do list style type like this, okay? And I can change what I want it to be. And there's more details in this in W3 Schools. But I can do list style type and I can say none. Okay, let's go ahead and refresh, see what it says. Okay, so I took that away. The other one for the underline, the link. Underlined links. Text decoration. That's what it is. Okay. So those would be, so anything in there should be text decoration. And we're going to say none. Let's go ahead and refresh. Okay. Now, it didn't do anything for text decoration, and that makes sense because that was applied to an unordered list, and these are the anchors that are nested inside of the line items. So it's not something that's going to be inherited from a parent element. So I could say .header nav container, and I can just say any anchor that's underneath it. And we're going to do this. Save it. Refresh. Okay, now I no longer have that. And I have this color here. So we could actually change the color. And let's just do white for now, just so it makes it easier for us to see. Okay. All right, so now we have them where they are side by side. My merch one, that's my last one. I'm going to want to do some styling on that. But when we want to set up our grid, so when we look up grid for positioning the children, we can have them choose to fill the whole area. We can have them snap to the left or the right. I forget what that piece is called. Grid item. We've done all those. It's not as crucial right now. I'll remember later. All right, so now that we got those pieces, let's snap that last one. So this is our last link. I'm going to give it this. So this is my grid item for this header nav container. So I can say that I want this to space out here. So let's do this. Give it a class, give it a name, and we're going to give it header nav last link. Okay, that is my class that I'm doing. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to type in, I'm looking for inside this container, this class. and I want this to be left margin auto. Oops. Nope, that's not it. I forget off the top of my head. This is what I'm talking about. I'm not going to know all CSS or HTML. Snapping the last link in a nav bar. Snapping the last link to the right. I have it in previous examples. Okay, let's see what they got. So Stack Overflow is a good resource to kind of ask questions, but a lot of times their questions are only working for specific cases. So if you use this as a site, you want to make sure that you're pulling what you need and not just taking everything. Okay. So they're doing flex. That's not really what we want. Using grid. Split navigation. That's what we want right there. So let's see. They're doing flex. Let's see if we can find in there. Well, that was useful. Yeah, margin left. That's what I did. Header, last link. Let's put a background around that and we can see what's happening. Yeah. Background, so if I wanted to check what's going on, I'm putting a nasty ugly color on here. I can see where the spacing is. Okay, so see how that's taking all of that space. So pushing that last one, actually I think I want to push the anchor over because that was the total size of what I was putting that link. Okay, so that's why I did that. So that last link, let's move this class instead of in the line item because that's the direct child. I'm going to move it inside of the anchor. That would make more sense. Okay, so in this case, now let's go ahead and refresh. There it is. Left margin auto. That should be snapping it. What is it called? I'm forgetting it. Grid fill options. It's we learned it on CSS Grid Garden too. Grid right align and snap left box alignment. There we go. That's what I want to see. Okay, so we're normally doing stretch, and we want it to snap over. Yeah. So these, that's taking up the full area. Align self is going from the start, the end, the center. So this is taking the whole thing, the start, the end, the center. Okay, and that's up and down. The other way, the justify self is left and right. It's the same thing. Okay, so we can snap that now to the right. align, justify self. So we're looking here. So we're going to do dot header nav. Since this is not working for us like this, let's move that class back. Sometimes we got to keep trying things. Let's move it back so that we'll have it align differently. Okay, so here, this left margin's not working for us because it doesn't want to play, but we could do justify self, and we want end. That should work. That's right? Yep. There we go. Okay. So there, we snapped it down. Now if I checked these are, so we can take off that color, that gaudy color. So there is basically our navigation. There's still some design that we would need to do to make sure that this is not taking up as much space, because it looks like it's leaving it. So we could double check, like if we were looking at let's do any of these containers. So anything that's directly subordinate. So if I wanted to check directly subordinate, I can just say this, directly subordinate. And what do I want? Let's just do a background. Let's make it green. Okay. So that's a spacing issue that we end up having here then. That's the main spacing issue. So we're going to do span 1, and I want it to start at the very last one. So that can ensure that I'm always at the end. Still doing that. There's a spacing issue. We could align everything in that nav down to here. So we could do this too. Justify self. That would be individually. We could do it. No, because I just want it for that one. It would be align. There you go. Okay. So now we have that. We can put spacing. We can do all kinds of stuff with it. But that gives us our navigation. And now when we are actually shrinking this down, we have a good looking navigation. And for the most part, let's see what it looks like. Okay, when we're shrinking down, we need to get rid of that space. Okay, so let's look here then. What did we use to actually change that right here? So this needs to get overrid. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to come down to here, and now we are overriding this. So I'm actually going to add a comment now here. So nav removing space for nav. And this is what I'm overriding. What do I want? I want to get rid of this justify self. Okay, so I would just put this back to stretch. That doesn't do everything. That puts it back, but now I'm not actually using all of the space. So I want to actually use this where I'm splitting all the space. And we should see in here this box alignment. We can center those. Let's do the, left to right. We could center all of them. Now, for the actual parent, we have other options. We can do space around, space between, space evenly, and these will actually give me content. So this is actually taking, I got to be targeting the grid itself. So the navigation grid, I can do that. So I could say space around or space between. So let's go ahead and do that. Because normally it's stretched. That's the default. So here, let's go to that main container. So we're overriding some stuff here. Oops. Let's come down to our sizing. Now, I don't need to change anything unless I only got to keep what I'm going to change. So here, I'm leaving the grids and stuff. What I'm doing is I'm doing justify content, and I'm going to do space around. Let's go ahead and check this. Now let's go ahead and resize. Okay, so it is doing that. I'll show you what space between looks like. Between. Okay, so that gives us that space. But this is still really big, so I actually want to change the the size of the grids. So, because this one is a much bigger one, so we need to look at where that was done. Not there, not there. Okay, right here. So this header nav container, that's what I'm overriding, which I already had that there. So I just need to copy and delete some of this. So I'm going to keep this still. I'm going to keep this still. So I just need this. This is what I need to change. So that's going to go here. And then I don't need this anymore. Okay. And what I don't want is I don't want 3FR like this. I'm going to change this to 5, and they all have the same size. So now when we resize, it's over to the right. And then when I shrink down, now we snap it and we got space in between. The space around means that it's going to be on the left. Now this merge, this is at the start. It looks funny. So we could double check that one because it seems like it's pushed all the way to the left. Justify self. Let's look here. Background. Let's make it pink. Yeah, so what I could do also is these, I can actually take all the text and I could center the text. So that's the other thing that I could do. So we know all those link items. So inside of here, we have this. We're now going to target. So we could put text align, and we can do center. Yes. Yeah, so I like that a lot better. Okay, so that is pretty much how we would do that. So now let's look at, so we've done commenting. Let's do some variables. Let's comment that out. End of variables. Okay, so in here, I'm going to end up, when you're using CSS variables, let's see, do I got it in here? There's a number of ways that we can use those. And we can use them individually in our each container, but we can also do it as an overarching one, as long as we're pairing this with the var and then writing the name, and we can even selectively downgrade our stuff as we're going. So this is basically what we want to do here in our code, is we basically want this. But what we're going to put for our colors is where we can actually reference. Why do I not see? There we go. Okay. So let's look at our colors. Here's our colors. I'm going to snap this to the side. And then we have our atom. Okay. So here, I'm going to actually just use those as my name. So dark color 1. And then I can just actually pull this. So I could start actually playing around with my colors. Dark color 2. Light color 1. There it is. Light color 2. So why would I do this? Well, the reason that I could do this is because if I decide to change my color scheme later on, this makes it super convenient for me to be able to do this. Let's see, bold color, because now I already have my color scheme. If I was doing this for a client and they're like, you know what, I want to do a completely different colored theme, I don't have to go through and rewrite everything. I already have it. Neutral color. Make sure that you're not doing this with spaces because they'll break it. So that's why I'm using dashes. And contrast color. So there's my last color. Okay. We still got to make our navigation vertical for when we get smaller. So we'll get to that. But now I have these colors. So if I wanted to change colors for what I'm doing, again, we can go out here and look. But these, usually we're going to put these as like in front of a light color or in front of a dark color. We're kind of alternating these with each other. We can use bold for titles and things like that. So this might be my color, or my contrast color is maybe what I'm going to be using, say, for my header text, okay, which we already put a class for, so that makes it a little bit easier. So here's my header title. Now I could do color, and then I can use the var and call that specific color. So whatever this is, let's do contrast color. I can just call that. Must have passed it. Okay. And then I could also, put, say, white or some other color as a fallback color. That's okay. And then I can go ahead and check. So there we go. And I'm probably still going to put some type of background, some type of transparency on it to make it so it's a little bit easier to see. I'm going to do that later. I can do the same thing with my navigation, give them some kind of color. So I did white here, but I could use my light color. So let's use light color 1 right here. And let's go down to our styling. So instead of white, we are doing var, and there we go. Make sure you're prefacing it with 2 minuses. Okay, so there's my color. Now my background, this is maybe where I could use the dark in front of it. So, and that's for the anchors. So that would be background. var. We know we're going to do something with there. So let's use one of our dark colors. So let's do dark color 1. Instead of green. So right here, we can remove this now. Okay, so those buttons, and maybe I actually don't want that color right there. I want it more on the buttons themselves because right now I have those for just the anchors. So if I want them to take up more space, then those would be the line items. So it would be the stuff that's subordinate inside of there. So I could play around with that. So I could do, this. The direct children to my container, which would be my line items. And then move that background color there. Okay, and then if I wanted to put space in here between these buttons, that's a gap. So this column gap right here, and I can give it something. Now, you don't want to use pixels if you can avoid it. It's better to use some type of percentage or something. So like if I was doing like 1em, that's like the default text size. We could do that, and that will resize if they were resizing their stuff. If you did pixels, it's okay, but then you got to be careful of how that's being used so that it's not too much. But now you have button actual items for your stuff, and when we resize, it snaps in there, so it's over the side, snaps in. If it looks like it's too close to the edge, I can actually give padding to it to make this bigger. So all line items, I can give some padding. So maybe I want to give padding of a little bit of space all around. And now those look a little bit bigger. That looks a lot better. Okay, and then when we size down, so that snaps together. Now when we go vertical and we get to cell phone width, that's not a good look anymore. That's where I would have to resize. Even the picture is going down, so I would resize this to vertical. So how would I do that? Well, first, this is only being done by this nav container. So this nav container right here is doing columns and rows. So if I'm overriding this, then I just go down to my cell phone size. And keep in mind, like once we get to the styling for the first media query, it's going to take whatever styling's there and keep that, and then would implement any changes here. So how I'm snapping things, all of that stuff, the sizing, that would change. So here I actually want it where it only has one FR, and I want margin auto let's give it maybe a width of, let's let it take its container for now. But our rows now is the number of items that we have. So repeat, we had 5, 1FR. Those don't need to get overridden. Okay, so let's save. Let's go back here. Let's refresh. That's looking better. So now we have this. When we get to cell phone size, we're snapping down. There's a sizing issue that I would have to deal with. I'm going to leave that for now because I think this video is already long. But now we have a vertical. We still got to do some sizing to center these, change the button sizing, that type of stuff. But that's the idea. We can start actually using our variables here to size our to actually organize and start to color our stuff to be consistent. We can overlap our grid items by actually giving them specific positionings by using the lines. Okay, so that's where we put our grid column starts, our grid column ends, grid row starts, grid row ends, and then we can use z-index for actually ordering if we want stuff to be in front of the other stuff. After that, then you're really looking at navigation and changing your navigation for, or excuse me, not your navigation, your media queries to size so that it's sizing properly, which is what we were playing with. Okay, so that in essence is as far as we're going to get for this video because we're getting kind of long. So we did add comments, we added root variables, we modified our nav and our header for grid, so we had grids within grids. So now we actually have our main grid, our header grid, and then we have our navigation grid. And then we changed our nav for different sizes. All right, so good luck. Have fun.